Hello everyone, this is Ghost, and today I'll tell you a story that left a mark on me forever. Grab some tea, because what you're about to hear will make you feel cold even in a warm room. It happened one February night. Winter was harsh and biting, and the cold could be felt even through the thick walls of my house. I woke up, as usual, in a cold room because I turned off the gas heater at night to save money. Shivering from the cold, I quickly got dressed, washed up, and made a couple of sandwiches in the kitchen, washing them down with tea. Everything seemed so ordinary, so peaceful. But that day, something changed. Something I still cannot forget, although if I could, I would forget it forever. My old Jeep, which I inherited from my grandfather, stood under a snow-covered tree. It had seen a lot: rust, dents, accidents, but none of them had been fatal. Or at least, that's what I wanted to believe. Starting the engine, I had no idea that this time it would take me somewhere I hadn't planned to be. As I drove out of the yard, I felt no anxiety. Everything seemed routine. But a few kilometers from home, a snowstorm arose so fierce that the road was no longer visible. Snow pounded against the windshield as if trying to break in. I thought about turning back, and then I saw her. A woman's silhouette stood along the road, barely visible through the snowy veil. She was waving her hand, gesturing for me to stop. I pressed the brakes, and a thought flashed through my mind. Where did she come from in such a blizzard? The woman quickly got into the car. Her appearance startled me. Long, wet hair almost completely covered her face. Only a lone eye gleamed through the strands. Her arms and legs were unnaturally long, as if they didn't belong to a human. Something about her figure seemed familiar to me. I had seen this silhouette somewhere before, but I couldn't recall where or when. It was as if something deep within me was blocking this memory. "Where are you heading?" I asked, trying to ease the tension. In response, silence. Not a single sound. I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye, but she sat motionless, almost frozen. A heavy, oppressive atmosphere filled the air. In my chest, the feeling grew that something wasn't right. Something was very wrong. The Jeep sped on through the storm, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The cold crept not only into the car, but also inside me. She was sitting next to me, but was she real? My hands gripped the steering wheel, and cold sweat ran down my back. Suddenly, her long fingers barely touched my shoulder, and at that moment, I understood. This was no ordinary woman. As a child, my grandfather often read me strange, fantastical stories. Back then, I thought they were just fairy tales. But now, it seemed like they were more than mere fiction. She, this creature, was not a figment of imagination. She was real, and now she was sitting next to me. The Frost Maiden of Nightmares. That's what they called her in that book. The only thing I remembered clearly. It said that anyone she touched would freeze forever, like a curse that could not be avoided. And then her fingers touched my sleeve. At that moment, it felt as if all the blood in my veins turned to ice. The cold wasn't just freezing, it pierced to the bone, to the very soul. I felt life literally draining out of me, as if everything inside me was freezing, standing on the edge of eternity. But that was just a touch to my clothing. What would have happened if she had touched my skin? I was terrified to even imagine. Then a wild, almost animal fear gripped me. Instincts screamed at me to run while I still had a chance. I didn't think. I just grabbed the door and jumped out of the car. Everything was so chaotic that I barely felt the impact on the ground. In panic, slipping on the snow, I ran without looking back. Only later, for a brief moment, I turned, and at that very second, I met her gaze. That gaze. It wasn't what I expected. In her eyes, there was not only cold, but something more. A deep, unutterable sorrow. Loneliness that pierced her as she pierced me with cold. It wasn't pure evil. But what was it then? Everything went dark. I passed out. When I came to, I was lying in deep snow. Amazingly, I had neither a scratch nor any pain. My jeep stood a few dozen meters away from me, as if nothing had happened. A strange feeling enveloped me when I noticed I was already near my home, though I didn't remember how or when it happened. What was that? Was she really as dangerous as in that book? Or perhaps there was another story behind this monster, a story of a victim seeking salvation. These questions haunted me, and if she really was a victim, I had to find out. I felt this was just the beginning. Something big and dark was already looming over me, and the answer to this mystery might turn out to be far scarier than I could imagine.